Coming to Shore-Friendly Kitsap's webinar series, part 2 on shoreline restoration and projects. I'm Angie. I run the communications at Shore-Friendly Kitsap, and I'm really looking forward to our time together today. Once again, we have a great turnout, and I'm so excited about the interest you all have in learning more about shoreline restoration. We have 2 great speakers with us today. First up will be Jim Johannessen, who spoke last week on coastal processes. For those of you that are new with us this week, Jim is the principal geologist of Coastal Geologic Services, which he started in 1993. Since then, he has performed hundreds of coastal assessments throughout the Puget Sound region and has run numerous coastal engineering design and restoration design projects. He has a lot of experience with shoreline projects and has been an amazing asset to the Shore Friendly Kitsap program as well. Our second speaker today is Jenny Morgan from Kitsap Conservation District. Jenny is a landscape architect and has worked with KCD since 2010. During her time there, Jenny has done designs for rain gardens, storm pond retrofits, and stream riparian restoration projects. That's a tongue twister. All right, she has been involved with several local projects you may be familiar with, including the Whispering Firs Stormwater Park and the David Road Culvert Removal Project. We are very grateful to have both these speakers here to share their expertise with us. But before we get started, I would like to introduce Shore Friendly Kitsap's program manager, Christina Karecki, and I'm going to give her a moment to talk about our program and what we do.
Hi, everybody. So nice to see everyone today. Again, I'm the program coordinator for Shore Friendly Kitsap, and I've been with the county for a while. But for the past 6 years, I've been very involved with Shore Friendly Kitsap and have been part of the team since the beginning. This program is unique in that it is sponsored by the county and sits within the Department of Community Development, but it is funded by the State Estuary Salmon Restoration Program. It isn't regulatory in nature, but it is incentive-based, and we serve all the landowners in the county, both in unincorporated areas and in the cities. So I know some of you have you watched last week's webinar, but for those of you that didn't, I'd like to do my shtick once more about the program so that you are more familiar with what we do. It is geared towards shoreline landowners, and our goal is really to empower people to consider natural shorelines and alternatives to hard armor and bulkheads for their properties. We help landowners with their bulkhead removal and soft shore projects, and we offer a number of incentives to help people be successful. We offer free site visits, project assistance, permitting assistance, and mini grants to help cover costs. And our goal is really to connect you, the landowner, with the resources and the technical support that you need to get your projects done. And so today you'll learn more about what those kinds of projects look like and what they entail. So we're psyched to host the second webinar. And today's webinar, like Angie said, will focus on shoreline restoration and the nature of what that is and what those projects really look like when you see them on the ground. If nothing less, I really hope today's presentation helps you imagine a range of possibilities for managing your shorelines and gets you interested. So today, the first part of today, we'll dive into shoreline restoration projects, and then the second half we'll discuss selecting native plants and designing planting plans. So with that, I'll hand it back to Angie. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. All right, so we're just about to get ready here, but before we do, just a few housekeeping items. I went through this last week, but if you're new, just kind of a refresher. So this is a webinar Zoom, which means you'll not be able to see other participants will not be able to see you, and you'll not be able to use your audio or video. What this does mean is that you have 2 options to talk to panelists and the host, which is me. So option 1 is going to be the chat function, which Christina will be managing. So if you have shoreline restoration questions for her, go ahead and send it over her way. General questions, you can send it through the chat and she'll get back to you on that. If you have specific questions for the speaker doing the presentation, please utilize the Q&A option, which is at the bottom of your bar there. It should be more towards the left-hand side. And I will be managing that. Those questions for our speakers will be handled at an intermission. So that'll be between the 2 speakers, between Jim and Jenny speaking. We'll have time for that. And then there will also be more questions that I will be asking our hosts, our speakers at the very end of the webinar. So that's how we're going to run things today. We hope you all enjoy, and I'm going to hand it off to Jim to get started. Thanks, guys.
Okay, it still can't share the screen, still says disabled, Angie. Let's see.
1 second. Let me get that for you.
Maybe it's when I'm trying to open the door and you're trying to unlock it. I'm not sure.
That might be it. Give me 1 second. Sorry, guys. All right, we should be good to go. All right.
Okay, here we go. Okay, you seeing that now?
We're all good.
Okay. Okay, so that's the title. Yeah, thanks a lot for the introduction, and yeah, hopefully the large majority of folks were here last week, same time, and got some of the background on the processes, or you've been studying up all your online sources. There's plenty of them out there these days. But I'm going to give you a run through of some more pure restoration projects, and followed by soft shore protection projects. At the very beginning, I'll give you, sort of a definition of those and talk about a couple of resources to, figure out where to get more information, define the types of soft shore protection right there at the beginning. And then, like I said, some of the bulkhead removal restoration, some of the soft shore protection with armor removal at times. Kitsap County is a large and varied county. There's a tremendous amount of shoreline, tremendous amount of coastal parcels, and a tremendous amount of variety. So I'm going to show you a lot of examples today. I'm going to move fairly quickly, and I'm hoping that, one or two of these projects, you say, oh, that looks a lot like my place. That's a really nice example for my place. Well, that other one, no, that's different. So we're going to give you the full menu of types of shores, I think. So I'm a consultant. I do assessment and design. I've been doing this for almost 30 years. Well, more than 30 years, but almost that long in my own business. And I want to, point out lots of the important things that I look at sites and that you can look at your own sites. First of all, I want to say not every shore needs a project. So we love doing projects, but we don't want to do them where they're not needed, and the agencies aren't giving out permits where they're not really needed these days either. So natural unmodified shores are valuable by themselves and really quite resilient in most cases. And like I said, the variety, even in this one little image, is tremendously high. These shores are dynamic. So a little bit of change and adjustment and shifting is natural. It's not the things to panic over. So the things to panic over are, if your house is truly threatened, not if the tree's falling into the water or something like that. So the exposure to waves, you go inside of, some of the south central Kitsap County shores, and your wave exposure, your fetch is a half mile or less. You go up to Fellweather Bluff or, the East Shore, you've got lots more open water. You've got ship wakes in some places. So that changes tremendously. The amount of development armor on the shoreline changes tremendously. And the more armor, which is bulkheads and seawalls, the less sediment is getting into the system and moving in the system. And you're more likely to have beach erosion. It's sort of a negative set of consequences the more highly developed the beach gets. And you can just look at the gray areas on the map versus the green areas, and you can see that from the airplanes and the satellites. Like I said, Fellweather Bluff, high bluffs, erosional feeder bluffs. And then right next door, we've got these natural lagoons and spits, developed spits, protected lands, urban lands. It's all around the county. So we have to think about how do we manage them. Well, the folks who build the bulkheads, they know how they want us to manage them, and they make a good pitch. You can see how pleasant it is sitting on top of the rockery wall with a Polynesian looking dress and a drink in hand. Call the number, they come out, they'll tell you what you want to hear. So there's been years and years of bulkhead building, generations of that. And the shore-friendly projects were programs came out of the need to counter the status quo from the 50s and 60s and 70s. We've greatly degraded the shoreline as a population here. We've seen salmon numbers plummet, and we're, all of us together are trying to restore salmon, trying to stop the loss. And it turns out that shoreline hardening, shore armor, contributes to lots of habitat loss and lots of direct and indirect impacts. So that's kind of why these shore-friendly projects and the regulations have become tighter. So talk about a few definitions. We need to know what we're talking about. So on the top of this spectrum continuum is natural green shorelines, unmodified. And on the bottom is, modified with hard armor, in some cases even filling out right over the beach. And then just below the top is what we call the soft shore protection. Sometimes it's called soft armoring, although I think that's really a bit of an oxymoron. It's called a lot of different things. Bioengineering, designing with nature, a whole variety of terms. Living shorelines is a term used for projects where they have some vegetation included, especially on the East Coast. So that's using natural products, elements. I'll actually define this a little more in one of the next slides, but it's using things to mimic nature, but to make it a little more robust. And then in the middle of the soft shore and the hard armor is this hybrid structures. So that's when we're looking at hard elements mixed in with gravel and vegetation, soft elements. And the example would be this project, which is pictured right there on the right, but a little more detailed during construction on the left. So they're using kind of a log crib wall. The logs are firmly anchored, nothing's flexible there, but then they're filling in with gravel and cobble. So that's clearly not a soft shore protection structure, not a classic hard shore, so that's the hybrid. And there's a variety of ways that that's being done. Mostly permitted towards a hard shore structure, but maybe not as much mitigation needed. Quick example for permit violations, there is enforcement of various types, and it can be county, state, or federal level. So here's just a quick example from Hood Canal a few years ago. When the feds came after this gentleman who built a bulkhead without a permit. And sure enough, there's a $60,000 fine in 2015, and that was going to go to the feds. There's also a $60,000 and $500 mitigation fee that was going to the local nonprofit Hood Canal Coordinating Council to do habitat restoration. I'm going to Hood Canal this Friday for a different enforcement site working for the federal government. So, there are more consequences, as we used to say to our kids, right, for breaking the rules these days. Here's a not quite up-to-date figure of armor replacement each year. The replacements in gray, new bulkheads are in the purple color, and the removed armors in that kind of lighter kind of magenta purple, whatever that is. So the removals going down from 0, the other ones are going up. And we can see the removals were really gaining steam in the early 2010s, peaking out, it looks like in 2016 at present, and then still some removals afterwards. I know we've had good numbers for grant-funded projects in 2019, 2020. I wasn't able to get the newest data. It's a bit of a lag from the state system. So there's been a lot of trend for bulkhead removal, and it's been going towards a net removal overall, even though this graph doesn't quite show that. In Kitsap County, this is from the Shore-Friendly Kitsap website, with Christina and crew have been orchestrating and helping to assist a total of 15 projects with some grant funds and site visits to many more properties, but 15 have had some form of removals of armor for over 1,100 feet of shoreline. And you could talk to Christina about more opportunities there. So the Marine Shoreline Design Guidelines, I introduced this quickly a week ago, MSDG for those of us in the know. It goes through how to understand these shores, what are the issues, how to figure out what the problems are for causing erosion. And then it goes through a variety of management techniques. These are the basic management techniques on the left, starting with full restoration. Bulkhead removal is the specific action discussed. Other structure removal. Passive techniques, which are things like vegetation management, staying away from the problems, basically drainage management, and avoiding clearing in the wrong places, so on, and relocating homes or other structures back from an eroding shore or bluff. And I'll mention one quick example of relocation in a few minutes. Soft shore protection. So that would be beach nourishment, which is adding material to the beach. So nourishing the beach, very simply, into food is sediment in this case. Gravel is the common protein and carbohydrate, and you throw in a little bit of vegetables for the sand for the vegetation to grow in, for your nourishment. Large wood is used in places, but it's a more restricted set of sites that it can be used at well. I'll go over that as well. And then bank reslope and revegetation. So high banks that are landslides or other problems are very evident, where it might be near a structure or a house or a drain field. I'll give you at least one example of that, and Jenny's going to talk about revegetation at the end as well. And then hard armor being the classic revetments, rockery walls, seawalls, bulkheads of all types, sheet pile, you name it. So that's got the more larger impacts. The various soft shore techniques and vegetation passive techniques can be used together or in combination. Spatial extent varies. It can be one parcel, it can be many. Turns out you can have more options with longer shoreline stretches, particularly in terms of beach nourishment. The designs need to address the site-specific needs, site-specific characteristics and objectives. So a quick example of relocation. This is a Google Earth image, of course, in perspective. If you look at that west-facing bluff on the Strait of Juan de Fuca, West Beach, Whidbey Island, you might see the erosion problem. Even though it's in the shade, you can see a very steep eroding bluff. And we have these condo buildings right in the middle that were just being moved back when this photo was taken. So the condo used to be out here pretty darn close to the beach, a three-unit condo, and it was moved back in 2018. So this is what that looked like on the ground when they're getting ready to move it. That was this building. And they're just jacking it up on these wood structures, putting the rails out to move it landward. And then I think they probably even put another rail in once they moved it here, moved it again. Here's all the cribbing they're building for getting under the building. So this is being done more and more. I've got a couple of residential examples on Whidbey Island. I know of a few others around other counties. And some of the alternatives analysis for particularly a new bulkhead request is, why can't you move the house? And that comes from the counties and the feds. That's that same structure. So getting ready to pull it off the old concrete foundation, move it landward. So that's pretty simple house relocation, right? It can get expensive, but no more expensive than a new bulkhead, actually, for some of these single family houses, for example. Beach nourishment, here's 4 quick examples from the Marine Shoreline Design Guidelines. So whether the left one was kind of a backshore dune with a little bit of wood in it, so it's the vegetated spot. On the right, we have a gravel berm high on the beach for one family's house only. So it has to be kept quite high on a short length project. Bottom left is a park. You'll see that quickly later. Bulkhead removal and gravel for erosion control and habitat. And on the right, this is a 4-house project. Removed a failing rock wall and put in a gravel beach. That had 100 miles of fetch way up into Canada. So even in high energy beaches where the waves are coming straight in, armor removal and beach nourishment is possible. So beach nourishment placement approaches, again from the MSDG. When you have a longer project along shore, you have more options, and you can do the full profile nourishment on the left. This is added material in gray. Compromise is mostly upper beach. If you have maybe a couple hundred feet of shore, this might be feasible. Shorter projects, quite high, is the sort of the full range here. Sometimes we'll key in a high project to make sure we have coarser sediment than what was there, for example. And rarely there's this bar beach nourishment. This has only been done a few times around here. Thinking you're going to add sediment, you're going to let it move onshore by itself. It turns out gravel tends to move onshore in a storm, and sand will tend to move offshore. So sometimes a lower placement is quite beneficial, but you have to be patient. You have to add a lot. So beach nourishment in general, favorable sites have are the no bank sites are the most favorable. You got more room, more things you can do. That's a before and after on the right, by the way. Excuse me. Lower to moderate wave energy sites are more favorable than high energy. But again, if the waves are coming head on, then the high energy sites can work quite well. Like a pocket beach is usually oriented towards the largest wave between a couple of headlands, that is. We don't want to do this at high erosional rates or places where houses are very close and the risk is high. It's not as permanent as a bulkhead, so we have to be upfront about that. In terms of placement, so the longer projects can extend lower on the beach, and you've got more options with longer projects, more places are suitable. So again, short projects are best kept up high. Sites with lower littoral or net shore drift rates are more favorable. And moving on to large wood. So large wood or drift logs, call it what you want. These are examples of built projects, again, from the design guidelines. So I'll show you the upper two projects. I'll actually show you in more detail, but the one on the left had large anchored logs parallel to shore. The one on the right had some logs put up at angles to catch other wood. So this is in a high drift wood area. This one is under the Hood Canal Bridge, done by others. And this is a pretty brute force approach with large cedar anchored. And then here's another one on the right with sort of some interlocking logs within a larger berm. When the logs are buried, they tend to rot a little faster is the only problem with that approach. So selection of wood is important too. So favorable sites for large wood would be, again, the no bank sites, the barrier beaches, pocket beaches, and then transport zones, which are the more neutral shorelines, slow erosional, low to moderate background erosion rates and wave energy. Again, not the highest risk sites, and the design guidelines has a way to look through and see about risk to assess that through some different characteristics. And then you need to have a little bit of room. That's why the no bank sites are best. For placement, usually placed higher on the beach where natural logs occur. There's been a couple projects that other folks have done where they're anchored quite low on the beach and they haven't done quite as well. This one on the right, I haven't really studied this much. I believe this is in Kitsap Memorial Park and down where you guys are. I don't know, there's much data on that. But if it's placed too low, it can get scour underneath the logs in particular. And the anchors take a lot of force in the chains and whatever else you're using. So really, I recommend the design guidelines recommend they're not installed below the high tide line. Like again, there's an example right there that's different. So we want to understand the causes of erosion that we're trying to deal with before we start into a design. Sort of like the doctor, right? Try to do a good diagnosis. So just a few graphics on the right. bulkhead-induced erosion on the upper panel. And then on the lower panel, if there's a lot of updrift bulkheads and sediment source reduction on a bluff, we might see downdrift erosion. So those are just a couple examples. And I'm not going to run through this whole table, but there's a table and a flow chart in the design guidelines. And they get at, beach nourishment is the abbreviations: large wood, relocation, hard armor, reslope re-veg, the bank revegetation. So these are the tools out there, and I'm going to just keep moving. The design guidelines also has a large case study appendix. So you've got 25 case studies that, again, maybe one of them is much like your place. It's all online, and you're gonna get the link from Angie and Christina. So goals for projects differ. We might have a pure restoration project on the left. We might have a enhancement and habitat and recreation project in the middle. We might have a single family erosion control on the right using soft shore. So the goals will help dictate the approaches and the needs. So a few bulkhead removal case studies and more restoration oriented that I've designed and my team has designed over the years. This map is actually not quite current. We can add a few more dots in the last few years to get a chance to update it. But all those are green bulkhead removal completion sites. And the yellow, well, this one's being removed today and last week and next week. We've got a few others that are in process. This one's been removed out at 3 Crabs. Anyway, so things are happening. This is the Powell site down on Whidbey Island, on Bainbridge Island, Port Madison, Bainbridge Island. Of course, in this area here, so it's a point that faces down into Port Madison, relatively low energy. The drift cell ends here. The sediment transport along the beach kind of peters out in this area. Oops. Bainbridge Island Land Trust got some grants 10 years ago, 12 years ago. 1,500 feet of shore on this large property. Most of it was armored many, many decades ago. We did the engineering and design and construction oversight. We had Northwest Ecological Services doing a revegetation plan. Some of the before on the left, we had falling down creosoted walls, creosoted wood, rock walls. We had concrete mortar walls. So we had access by barge and loading out all the debris by barge. We had a cultural site in this area, a big shell midden that the tribes were concerned it not be damaged. And then we removed the armor. We didn't do a whole lot of bank regrading. We transplanted the pickleweed, the salt marsh, and then cleared out invasives and then started to plant. This is a before on the left, after on the right. All of this was cleared of invasives and planted. So you see the regrowth. And then the rock wall was left in just one place to protect the house and the drain field and all the services they had. The other part of the site, the before, there was a drain field right actually back in here. So put a little bit of a gravel berm just to be safe. And then revegetated. And that's revegetation after 6 years. Owner's been very, very happy. There's been a few field trips like this one down to the site. So I'll go through a bunch of case studies here. I've got this little key. This is a San Juan County site right by where the Friday Harbor Ferry pulls in. It pulls in around this island. So we're on the south end of this little brown island. It's a feeder bluff site here in the key. It's only got 0.7 miles of fetch from the southeast. It was a 200-foot long project. Armor removal for 200 feet. There's 3 parcels with rock walls in here. It was historic feeder bluff and 2015 removal. That was the before photo there. So rock walls high on the beach. And the owner's house wasn't that far back. It was here, but we had a fairly small wave energy, slow erosion rate. And the owner here was very happy to try to naturalize the shore. She's very interested in salmon restoration and getting more room to walk on our beach as well. This makes more room for forage fish to spawn on these upper beaches, makes room for vegetation to regrow. The litter falls, the bugs fall, the adult salmon actually eat large insects coming out of trees. We know because we've looked in their stomachs. So this is the before on the left, immediately after on the right. So it still looks a little raw. And then the dune grass plantings just popped in the ground the day before this photo was taken. And come back a couple years later, got backshore vegetation has all come in on its own. The dune grass is spread naturally and through the planting. No extra bank erosion. And here's the owner once again explaining things to some other folks. Okay, here's another before from San Juan County. This is on Orcas Island. So we have a little more fetch than that, but only 1 mile from the northeast and the east. This is a no appreciable drift shoreline. So it's a little pocket beach surrounded by bedrock, 110 foot long. So this is a dripping, oily, creosoted wood wall up here. Some fill behind it, and then a rock armored slope extending out over the nice, beautiful beach they have. The owners changed hands, new owners from younger folks with some interest in restoration took over, and they started cleaning out some of the creosote from the dock and upgrading that, and they wanted to restore this area as well and free up some of the beach. So sure enough, we pulled that wall out. The contractor removed all that rock, and then we actually graded it back a little bit to get ahead of erosion that sea level rise is going to cause, as well as the kind of catch-up erosion that would have occurred after it being bulkheaded for 60 years and no change. So you can see it was actually benched back in sections. A little bit of drainage control had to go back in that was already there before we came. A little bit of rock was moved to protect these giant cedars. And then we're getting a wider, higher beach here. So that's the finished product. Dune grass planting, other native vegetation was just going in 2016. New steps further set back. So owners have been very happy. There's been forage fish spawning that's occurred here after the fact with some monitoring. So that's a single family. It's a little bit of a larger project, but still a singly owned parcel. They actually took the house down and built a new one further back as well. Here's a small site way down in Mason County, Arcadia Point. So this is an older house, probably from the 40s, 50s. They had a private little boat basin. So this was a really odd spot. It's full of water, as you see here, because the beach came up on its own, concrete walls. This is a known fish trap. So tide would come in, salmon would go in there perhaps, tide would go out, it would turn into a warm pool, and the fish would die. So when the Squaxin Island tribe bought this, they wanted that thing gone. It was not usable. There's a spit and a bar in here. And they were hoping to take this bulkhead out, but then it was determined through our investigation, there's a drain field, septic drain field right here. So that couldn't be taken out at the time. However, the private boat ramp, they'd had no use for it. That was removed because there's a much larger, much better public boat ramp right here. And the tribe actually does use that. They always have. So the before, here's that fish trap kind of basin to nowhere. And then after removal, we filled that in with the concrete to save some money and then filled it in with soil, put a little bit of gravel sand mix over the top. So pretty straightforward project. Moving on to another one. This is a community, private community. And this is up in San Juan County in Blakely Island. So we're up here, the eastern San Juan County. It's got about a 10-mile fetch from the northeast, which is sometimes the big breeze from Canada. So it can get pummeled at times. This ownership was just this strip through here. And it's private ownership behind. This whole community owned this as their biggest beach. And they were seeing it erode away and all this junk, these rock and concrete and cable steel fall out of this filled road to nowhere. This is 1997. I was brought in for sort of a second opinion to see if they should build a rock wall like the original kind of knee-jerk reaction was. A lot of people didn't really want that. And I came up with a beach nourishment alternative. turns out when I presented it to the community, an old guy spoke up and said, you know, well, how much gravel do you want to add out there? And we said about 1,800 cubic yards, you know, about 18 dump truck loads. He's like, that's about what I hauled off that beach in the 1960s. He said, I was driving truck, hauling gravel to the airfield, excuse me. And he took it out. He was just driving truck, just following orders. So gravel mining was a big problem around here up till fairly recently. A lot of our beaches were mined for construction, for all kinds of things. We've got pictures of horse-drawn carts carrying gravel and sand off of beaches around here. It's a worldwide problem, and it's underappreciated. So we brought in gravel and a lesser amount of sand. We pulled that road back and out. We tried to avoid the high power cable that was feeding all of San Juan County, or at least half of it, with energy here from Bonneville Dam. When we asked the provider to bury the cable because the beach had eroded some, the service provider said no, but you don't want to hit it, especially with your steel barge. So we managed to avoid that. So that's during construction. Obviously, this is 1998. 2 years later, we had, actually in early 99, we were finishing it. Yeah, that should have been 1999, that last one. 1 year later, this is what it looked like. Shore pines were brought in, dune grass, and one of the locals actually found some drift logs and augmented the natural accumulation that was already there. And then last year, looking wonderful, zero maintenance. This is actually in a video, Restore America's Estuaries Living Shoreline video. I helped them film that. You can find that Living Shoreline video very easily online and see more of the story. And maybe you can get the link from Angie. If you have any really pressing questions, put them in the chat, and Angie can interrupt me as needed, but I'm just gonna keep pushing through. Got another half here roughly. So these are beach enhancement and soft shore protection projects. So these are mostly single family, not all of them. And this is usually when there's some big worry about erosion, these next set of projects. These are all ones that we designed, so I know them very well. Proposed defining qualities of soft shore protection. So based on natural coastal processes, so working with the forces of nature, not trying to strictly fight them. Flexibility in design. Natural material is used. Gravel's the #1 go-to. Sand, logs, anchored or unanchored. Logs with root masses, boulders at times, but not a rock wall, and lots of native vegetation. The more stable elements, like the gravel size, can be increased to enhance stability without forming an absolute barrier. Drift sills are a short rock groin going across shore, and we avoid those unless absolutely necessary, such as an urbanized shoreline. You'll see that in 1 or 2 of the park projects. And each design is site specific. There's no off-the-shelf design for this. Here's a private example of a group of homeowners. Like I said, a longer shoreline makes a better, more flexible, versatile longevity as well. So this was about a dozen houses and cabins on North Samish Island here. It's got actually a fairly large fetch from the Strait of Georgia that makes its way inside here in the Bellingham Bay for 10 miles. So that when the north winds blow, this site gets hit really hard. You can see the bulkheads were falling down and the overwash was right up by the houses. We considered moving some of these houses back, but there was nowhere to go. There's a bank behind them. And in fact, there had been a landslide that touched somebody's back door at one point years ago. So no options to move back. These blocks were just rearranged in a line temporarily. They didn't fall down in a straight line. But this is 98. Again, it was a bad year. This is a highly impacted drift cell. So the drift cell is from west to east. And where the feeder bluffs are on the west, it's about 80% armored and bulkheaded. So the big sediment source, there's no river here. I mean, there's Samish River, but it spits out silt and clay, and it doesn't come to this beach so much. The bluffs are all armored, so the sediment is not getting down the beach. And what little natural sediment there is blocked by some of these big groins and fill areas. The project site is at the beginning of this large spit, which is usually, if a spit's going to erode, it's going to erode first and most at the base or the beginning, the neck. So, like I said, here's these houses. The northerly storms were pounding into the walls, putting a lot of water over the top, and some of the walls are starting to collapse. So these people had been there for 3 generations. They said, we really don't want to rebuild these bulkheads. We want you to come up with something more natural, because we remember the beach as kids. It used to be a lot higher, a lot nicer, a lot sandier, and we want to go back to that as much as possible. This was a surf smelt spawning beach as well, so there's some constraints on what we could do. They spawned, right around where these blocks are stacked, so we're looking to augment the beach if possible and not just build big walls. So we brought in lots of gravel, and we put a very fine gravel layer on top. This was brought in by barge. This boy on the bulkhead has graduated college a few years ago, so we know it's quite a while back. We put a coarser gravel here, we graded it, put a finer gravel on top, and a little bit of sand in the back shore. This is sort of the end of the project. And this is a few years after Nourishment. The Dune Grass is starting to come in. That's that same greenhouse in the middle that you saw, the broken down wall. Big wide beach, there's been 0 maintenance since it went in. Surf smelt spawning has recommenced. And by 2013, you can see a fine summer day, the vegetation's come in more wood has come on its own. There is one drift sill on the far end of this project to slow down littoral transport, rock structure. 2013, yeah, it's kind of a repeat. Okay, here's a Kitsap County project. This was one that got a little bit of assistance through the Shore Friendly Project program. And this was a frosty day, that's why it looks so gray, a couple winters ago. And you can see maybe in the middle, the concrete bulkhead is starting to fall down. It's cracked in several places. It's leaning out. There's more cracks along the way. One of the constraints was this little deck fairly close. But most of this structure, well, all of this structure was taken out. And there was a little bit of structure repaired and replaced near this giant tree and near the stairway. Here's the on the ground before pictures. So you can see the walls literally just about ready to fall down, and the erosion is getting behind it. And then they had this nasty Japanese knotweed, highly invasive exotic species they were eager to get rid of. So part of the project actually scraped all that out, took the roots and soil away. And here's the beginning of the project. So you got a little bit of financial assistance through the mini grant to do this, do part of this project. And we can see the wall starting to come down and be removed. See the beach was pretty mucky at this point. It's got a articulated bucket so we could move around, get everything out of there. Other angle is when we're starting to get an anchored log in there. It's got some anchors buried down below grade. You can see we pulled back some feet here, and then this wall is coming out next. So that's all been removed. There's 2 logs anchored in and some coarse gravel brought down. And then the exotic species removed and some jute fabric, and planting has just occurred. This is right after the project. And then the house up here, the deck is just off on that left edge as well. And same project here. I guess this is right before planting. Let's see if this video works of one of the owners. You might have to turn your volume up. Volume up. Let me start that over again. We couldn't get the volume any louder. Volume up. Okay, hopefully folks can hear that. I've only got one more video like that. Angie, step in if you just couldn't get it loud enough.
It was pretty quiet. Yeah, I caught most of it, I think.
Okay, well, maybe we'll try the other. So just another view here. Kayaking was really big for these folks. So they've got a nice little kayak rack in there, and beach is naturalizing. This is just a few weeks ago. This photo was taken, and the dune grass is there, just a little bit of it. This deck was a bit of a constraint. It would be nice if we were able to move that back, but anyway, we worked with it. So let me try this this last video like this again, up. Okay. Oh. Okay, so Bainbridge Island, you know, part of Kitsap County even. This is where the ferry comes in from Seattle. So this is the south side. The ferry comes in off to the north here. So Pritchard Park is now this whole area. This one's back in 2006 when they were still doing a lot of cleanup on this old town of Creosote wood treatment facility from 100 years ago. So that's all armored with sheet pile wall for a good reason. It's highly toxic. And then there's an old wall that used to be here in front of what's now part of the park. This was removed by a city of Bainbridge Island soon after 2006. I forget exactly what year. We helped some others on this design. So zooming in, you can see the old treated wood wall here.
Hey, Jim, do you mind if I interject just real quick?
Sure.
There were just a couple people, they couldn't quite hear the costs in the video. They were hoping that they could hear that or you could summarize that for them. Is that okay?
Yes, that last project, that one ended up being more expensive than the owner hoped for. I think he might have said. I couldn't even hear that playback this time because I'm keeping it down. That project was really tough because you couldn't come in by water. It was too shallow. And it was hard to get down the bank, and it was a long haul from the hill to get all the way over there. So it was a lot of handling of material, really lousy access. I think his total costs for everything were around $70,000. Typically, these projects are more like, you know, $25,000 to $40,000 when the access is pretty good. So it's not cheap, but you know, like I said, his was really expensive because of that. New bulkheads these days can be, you know, anywhere from $300 to $700 per lineal foot, sometimes even more than that. 500 is a pretty common number for a single family residential size. And so usually these armor removal or restoration projects are well below that price. And occasionally, you know, there's assistance from the programs or grants or different things as well. So this Pritchard Park, this is the before removal and after removal. So this is the stretch right through here where that whole bulkhead was removed. This is a photo from 2016. I'll go back again. So before the parking lot was close, the beach, you know, there was zero beach at high tide. The high tide would be up on top of this face of this wall face. So before and after. So now we've got the beach back, we've got a back shore, we've got a vegetated bank, and we pulled the parking lot back way over here. And then there's a video here. There's no audio to watch, so I'll just play this quickly. There's no audio to listen to. So that's the Superfund site. I guess he calls it the Wyckoff site, as well as the old town of Creosote, which is sadly humorous. And then we get on to the, the real park recreation side over here. This is just a few weeks ago this video was taken. So lots of beach exposed, lots of drift logs, the vegetation's come in well. And then beyond the project is the middle there where the trees are falling down still. And then we can run into private property right after that. Let's see if I can stop that. Okay. Okay, so just a few more quick examples. This is the before, during, and after for Marine Park in Fairhaven, part of Bellingham. This is where the 7-leg relay race, the ski to sea race ends, if you've ever heard of that. It used to be that the surf ski and the kayakers would come into this beach, jump out of their boat with their cramped legs and arms and try to run on safely up this slope to finish up here, ring the bell. I've seen several people kind of fall on their face and hopefully not break their teeth, which I have not seen. This was a public safety hazard, and the Port of Bellingham owner wanted to get rid of this rock wall. They had some grant money to do so. This is partial beach nourishment partway through the project. We did build this rock drift sill to hold the material, and then we filled right up to the top of that drift sill in the lower left. And then, the events could commence after that. That one won a national award. So back to single family scale beach nourishment. This is from the Marine Shoreline Design Guidelines Appendix. So we're over here at the beginning of this spit, erosional area, Lummi Island, Whatcom County. We've got 35-foot setback to the septic drain field was the big worry. 15 miles of fetch from the southeast. So moderately high energy. This is the before condition with the broken down wood wall, and the erosion heading towards the drain field was the worry, like I said. Yeah, excuse me, here's the site plan, house, drain field. So we ended up taking out the wall remnants out here and building a high backshore gravel berm, straddling the high water, straddling the erosional bank. And that's immediately after construction with the other almost college graduate here. And this is the berm we built after the first few big storms. Dune grass is just starting to come in. We monitored this for the Marine Shoreline Design Guidelines. So this project profile goes through the middle. You can see it was a gravel nourishment here above the old eroded blue beach and up over the top. And then a bunch of years later, we profiled it with a black line. So a little bit of gravel moved from there on up. So that's the thing, it moves onshore, like I said earlier. And that's the picture in year 9 after project installation. The owner hustling to try to get out of the photo, if I remember right. Dune grass and Nootka rose, wild rose, be very hardy salt tolerant plants that do great in a backshore or on a lower bank. Can really help during the big high water events. Okay, so log placement at a very high wave energy site on West Whidbey, 68 miles of fetch from the west, from the Strait of Juan de Fuca, very high wave energy. And the county would not allow a hard structure. And then I was tasked with coming up with a soft shore design. This is one with anchored logs at an angle designed to trap other logs. So that's these logs up in here. So this one's performed very well. This is 2008. I haven't been there in a couple years now, but it's done very well. Logs out front, in front of their wall in their house. You can see chains on a few of these. This is year 3. This beach is very dynamic. Okay, so moving on, I got a quick reslope revegetation project. This is the before photo. This gentleman had a slide, and there was just a fairly weak landscaping attempt at some really lightweight jute that was not doing very much for it. There was no revegetation. Jute by itself on an eroding or a landslide this steep is not going to do much unless it's high strength material and you're going to plant it fairly densely and well. Obviously close to the house. There was no bank toe erosion. This is not good for a truly actively eroding bank toe. In this case, there's no railroad grade at the bottom. So there is no wave effect. So that's the before. From the top, when the slide was just a little bit fresher, and you can see there's seepage at places over the clay. So the owner was quite worried in 2018. He installed drainage control, which was the first thing we want to accomplish in a house that is this close. And then we can go back with some other measures. So in this case, we used a really high strength, high quality geofabric erosion control blanket. And this has some synthetics and a lot of coconut fiber to keep moisture in, to keep sunlight down, to control the invasives. Right before they put that in, they put a native grass seed mix under the fabric and then anchored the fabric to the slope. He's actually nailing it now, and it's secured really well on the top. A short while after this fabric went in, before the planting, this was just the grass coming through. Then they came back and hit it with planting on this day. You can see bundles of live stake plantings at the bottom. Sound Native Plants out of Olympia did this work for this owner and for us. And you can see just a little more than a year later, some of this was regrowth of alders from the edges, but all of this was planted and regrowth through here and under this area as well. So things are taken off very quickly after the first couple seasons. And the owner was happy. Okay, quick project with anchored logs. It looks like I'm not even late yet. Good. This is a site in Blakely Island again. The beach nourishment project was off to the left we saw a few minutes ago. This is a drift cell origin site. So there's a drift cell that starts here, it goes this way to the left, and then other drift cell goes off to the right and makes this spit, goes all the way to this spit. So this is a zone of drift divergence. It's also a zone of a lot of wakes because there's a pass right here that a lot of boaters use, and then some storm waves. So there's erosion going on here towards this woman's cabin. Of course, she's trying to get out of the photo too, but she wasn't quick enough. Her site is on the left, so you can see the sliding. And there's another site on the right. So the bulkhead on the right tended to refract waves, cause waves to refract, and had some exacerbated erosion. You can see that bulkhead has been falling down for years, and they've put rock in front of it as well. And it's, sure enough, holding vegetation for now. So she was looking to augment with soft shore protection. We ended up bringing in some very large logs. That's that bulkhead in the back. Here's her property. Brought in some very large logs and anchored them here, and brought in some coarse gravel high up on the beach. And we didn't nourish way down here. This is just disturbance from the excavator. So he's trying to grade it and get ready to go. Move this material back up, and then he was done. So 2015 during the project, 2015 immediately after the project. And I don't think I have a current photo for this one. It's kind of a relatively remote site. Okay, finally, this is a single family residence, a small lot. This is in Oak Bay, south of Hadlock and Port Townsend, moderate wave energy. Facing to the east here, facing east. This is a high water storm. And this was an illegal bulkhead, no permits. And he actually tried to permit a concrete wall. He was denied, and he managed to go out and build this anyway. There was an enforcement action by the state of Washington and Jefferson County, and he was told to remove the rock wall. And if he wanted to design soft shore, he could maybe do that. The rock wall was also impinging on the mouth of this little tiny salmon stream that had some restoration projects in it. So that all this rock was removed, and we did a soft shore. The house is quite close, but just enough room to work in here. This is after, I forget what year this is. This is only after about 4 or 5 years, and it looks the same or better when I was there last year. No maintenance at all. Okay, so in summary, given a little bit of room and having a somewhat of a setback and not a high amount of disturbance, all these shores can get by without a real project. A lot of times developments happen closer. The no bank sites are typically more viable than the high bank sites for soft shore protection, as like I said. Beach nourishment can avoid traditional bulkheads in many cases. Sometimes it can allow for bulkhead removal and augments loss in sediment supply from other developments. Beach nourishment will work best at low wave energy sites or where the waves are hitting directly onto the shoreline. The large logs are a little more limited, best used only high on the beach in areas with intermittent erosion, and often we use them with beach nourishment and vegetation. The bank reslope and revegetation can work where the bluff toe erosion is very slow, and it's sometimes right after a slide where you're worried it's going to exacerbate problems. It can help control things where there's some risk to the house or the other developments. And we can't forget about sea level rise, so we're trying to design everything at a little higher elevation, getting ready for the acceleration that everybody's predicting in sea level rise. Okay, with that, any questions? I'll let Angie and Christina handle that. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. I have a couple questions coming in through the Q&A now. So if anyone has some more questions for Jim, go ahead and do that now and I can start asking them to him. We'll get those taken care of. All right, are you ready for the first one?
Sure.
Okay. So we've got, what do you recommend for a cove or bay like Apple Tree Cove and Port Gamble Bay to prevent mud buildup and loss of beach sand? It would seem removing bulkheads would contribute to future problems of rising tides and further contribute to the mud buildup.
Yeah, I've heard that in some places. In fact, on West Port Gamble Bay, I know there's been increase in fine sedimentation. Part of the, well, I'm not sure the exact nature of those problems, but I mean, fine sedimentation is natural in many of these quiet bays as well. So how to keep sand? I mean, if sand nourishment occurs, and it's higher, high on the beach, higher in elevation, usually it can stay above where the fines might come in. The fines like to come in the lower beach most typically. That'd be one idea, and not sure other ideas. If there is a lot of fine sediment, you're not going to stop it in most cases. You can only try to get above it, I think would be my simple answer. Did I miss part of that, Angie, or did I answer that?
I think you got all of it. Yeah, thank you. All right, let's see. Next one I've got, okay, our beach is more of an estuary and mostly mud. Would it be healthier to add gravel?
Well, that's a good question too, and that gets to that pesky mud question. I mean, generally speaking, we try to match or typically go a little coarser in sediment. However, like that site you saw in Miller Bay, where sometimes part of it is, that same site had cobble on it naturally, but then the part of their property where we were concerned about had mud. Other parts of Miller Bay have gravel and cobble. So it wasn't like it was a foreign material, it just wasn't there. But at the same time, in sort of a low to medium energy shore, I don't think I really said this, but sometimes if you add gravel that's too large, like a cobble, a big one, it'll roll down the beach and it won't come back up. So if there's enough wave energy to move things around, but not enough to push them on shore, the large material is not going to help you, and it's not going to help the habitat either. So there is a number of ways to size material, from using reference sites nearby that are very similar. There's some empirical formulas we use, and there's modeling that we use mostly for the larger projects because it gets pretty complicated. The reference sites are sometimes just as good. So what's working in a natural beach nearby? We don't want to go too coarse if we don't have to, but if we don't go too fine, it can wash away. So it's an eternal balance.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Next question. What's the best way to anchor logs so that they don't float away?
The best way to anchor logs is number one, with a permit, and number two, with a big machine. So, you don't go bringing big machines on the beach without permits. That can get you in real trouble. And, I've seen everybody and their brother try tying logs with line or some little chain that you buy at the hardware store, and those generally don't work. When the storms get big, the forces on the logs are pretty significant. When a wave hits a long log, there's a tremendous amount of force. So typically we use buried concrete anchors, sometimes as big as 2 by 2 by 6 feet. Other times when the substrate is correct or is right, we can use a big auger anchor that can be driven in with a machine. And if you have 10 guys and a giant crowbar, or 5 guys, you can maybe screw these things in too, but it has to be the right type of sediment, not too hard, not too soft, long story short. So like I said, with the big machine and the big equipment is the way to anchor them to stay.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I've got a couple more. So next we've got, I've been trying in vain for 5 years to grow something in large riprap on my property. Any suggestions? It's on the Hood Canal. I have tried shore pines, Nootka roses, willow wattles, just got some dune grass to take, but minimal success. This might also be a great question for Jenny too. So, but wanted to ask you first.
Yeah, well, you have to get something for those plants to grow in other than the riprap. We've done it in a few places to use a small angular rock to sort of plug the holes in the riprap, and then add a pea gravel sand mix, and then something like dune grass is the hardiest. That's probably going to be your most success. Otherwise, you kind of need to reshape the rock in these little planting circles or areas, and do those same things to plug the holes, and then add the soil and sand, topsoil and sand. Shore pines are pretty hardy, but still they need some soil. I don't know if Jenny or Jesse wants to jump in.
That sounds about like what I would have suggested. Smaller things will need less soil, so maybe start with the dune grass.
And the dune grass can be transplanted very easily, and you can get it from bare root starts for 50 cents a pop if you shop around. So very versatile, useful plant. It's right in this photo too.
Awesome. Thank you both. Appreciate that. Okay, it looks like we've got 2 more questions. So next we've got, can you speak to the additional cost of removing creosote piles holding a bulkhead?
Yeah, so the creosoted piles, the tarry treatment has many toxic and cancerous carcinogenic compounds. There is a big priority for getting it out, but there's not quite as much funding as there once was. So it is extra cost. It has to be disposed of properly in approved upland facilities. I'm not sure if Kitsap has any incentives or any place that creosote wood can be taken. A few counties do. You can just take it and they'll take it off your hands. Christina, or you guys, do you have any info on that?
Hey, sorry, it took me a while there. Well, with respect to creosoted material, as of now, I mean, it in a project, it'll go to the transfer station in Tracyton, I believe. We have had partnerships with DNR before, where their removal program or creosote, removal program they've taken some of the debris for projects, but that's sort of on a case-by-case basis, and I wouldn't want to make that that promise kind of into the future indefinitely, but we have had success there working with DNR.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. And then when there's larger amounts of creosoted, like old piles or a lot of it that's washed up in one area, DNR does kind of collect those addresses, and if they get an opportunity, they're in the area doing cleanup, they'll try to put projects together and take it away. But like I said, the funding's been reduced a bit in recent years due to economic issues.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Okay, let's see. Next, I've got what strategies for soft shore protection can be applied to a steep high bank?
So steep high bank, again, the bank re-veg and reslope is, the only thing specifically on the bank. It doesn't always have to have fabric. There can be, planting strategies that I'll let Jenny talk about. For the toe of the bank, then it depends on some of those key things I kind of quickly introduced: the erosion rate, causes of erosion, where we are in the drift cell, how much wave energy, all those things. So we've done a few beach nourishment and anchored log projects on high bank sites. I showed you at least one towards the end there. And that was a intermediate energy site. And we had enough room in the back beach, the back shore to anchor logs. So those are sort of the common tools that are used. I'm not sure I can give a lot more detail. Like I mentioned last time, though, drainage control is one of the first things to look at for a high bank property. Whatever you can control from the uplands, whatever you can do to augment vegetation, and then once you've done most of that, then start looking at the beach options.
Awesome.
And I guess the other part I should probably say, if I didn't say it last time, I mean, a little bit of erosion is natural. Erosion should not cause panic. And most of these shores are eroding at 1 to 3 inches per year at the high bank sites. So even if it's 3 inches per year, or more extreme is 4 or so, that rate is not going to be rapid in terms of, quickly moving back to a house that has any kind of decent setback. So it's really where the house does not have a decent setback, is the only place you need to worry. So it's not that all erosion is bad, all erosion needs big projects. It's really, what do you need to protect is the question.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. And I've got one more question to wrap this up, guys. All right. So it says, Jim mentioned permitting anchoring for logs. Is a permit required to pin driftwood that naturally lands on a beach? It's interesting. I'm not sure what the answer is there.
Well, that's where you get into the matter of interpretation. I mean, technically speaking, and anything you do with hardware and building, within 200 feet of the shore's high tide line and across the beach, should get some sort of notice from the county permits, or whether they, give you a quick exemption or not so quick exemption. Natural logs that land on your beach or that are floating in the water, are not off limits. So you can pull a log off the water, you just can't pull it off your neighbor's property. As far as if you're just installing an anchor by hand, technically you should probably have a permit, but it's not the kind of issue that is building a new bulkhead where, there's major implications for enforcement. So maybe I should leave it at that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jim. All right, so we're going to start to transition here. Now that questions are done, we're going to give the speakers a couple minutes to get settled, give you guys a couple minutes if you need to grab a coffee or a bathroom break, and then we'll get rolling with part 2 with Jenny from Kitsap Conservation District. All right, we'll see you back in about 5 minutes, guys. Thanks so much. All right, gonna kind of let people filter back in here, make sure everyone's good to go. And then we'll have Jenny up in just a minute. Thanks for waiting, guys. I'll give it about 45 more seconds or so. All right. Okay. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you all being patient. Hopefully, you have your coffee, got a bathroom break. And now we're going to have Jenny from Kitsap Conservation District speaking for us. She's going to be our next presenter, and she's going to be discussing native plants and designing planting plans. All right. So I will let her have the floor. Take it away, Jenny.
Hi, thanks. Let me get this set up. That's not what I want. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Hold on.
No worries.
There we go. Now I'm getting closer. How does that look?
Looks good.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to talk about native plants. But first I wanted to take a second by acknowledging that the land that we gather on is within the Aboriginal territory of the Suquamish people. Expert fishermen, canoe builders, and basket weavers, the Suquamish live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's central Salish Sea, as they have for thousands of years. Here, the Suquamish live and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Okay, so native plants are those that grow naturally in an area without having been introduced. Because our native plants evolved here, they're adapted to our local soils and climate. However, increased drought in summer and rain in winter caused by climate change is stressing some of our key native plant species like Western red cedar and Douglas fir. The qualities that make native plants good for shoreline properties is that many of them are drought tolerant, so they won't need to be watered once they're established. They're not prone to pests or diseases, so they won't need pesticides or herbicides. And they help stabilize the soil with fibrous and deep root systems. They provide habitat for native insects and the animals that have co-evolved with them. These three plants on the screen, the Pacific ninebark, Nootka rose, and ocean spray, all great shoreline plants, have all of the qualities that I just mentioned. So I'm going to go through a few criteria you can use when you're picking plants for your property. Right plant, right place is a concept that suggests you should match the appropriate plant with the existing site conditions. This includes soil type and moisture, sun and shade conditions, and the ultimate size that the plant will get to. There are some really good resources on the internet and in books and publications that provide lists of native plants that work best in a variety of conditions, including the special conditions found along marine shorelines. And I've included some of the resources that I use most often in the handout that Angie's going to email out to all of you. So pictured here on the left is dune grass. It's a widespread common grass in the near shore and backshore environments, and it grows rapidly on dunes and gravelly beaches. So it's a really important plant for stabilizing those conditions. And then on the right is hooker willow. Hooker willow usually only grows within a few miles of salt water. It has a great root system for stabilizing slopes. It prefers moist soil, and it will grow close to the shoreline, so it's good for providing shade on the beach. Another thing to think about when you're choosing plants is whether or not the plants you're considering are actually available to buy. So these are some sources for native plants, and I've included more details on the resource list that's going to get emailed to you. So local nurseries often sell a limited variety of nice quality native plants, like this one here is sword fern from Valley Nursery. Native plant nurseries will have a wider selection. They also may offer what's called conservation grade plants, which are plants that are a little less perfect looking, and they might cost less, but they're just as useful for restoration projects. Native seed suppliers are a good source for low growing lawn mixes and native perennials and annuals. The Washington Native Plant Society is a good source of information about native plants. And they also have, I think, a couple of plant sales a year. And that's a place where you could probably find some of the more rare, harder to buy native plants. Some native plant species are actually really easy to propagate. And there's a book that I refer to quite often called Grow Your Own Native Landscape. I've included some information about that book on the resource list. And then conservation districts have plant sales once a year, and that's a great source for native plants. The Kitsap Conservation District has an online pre-order sale. We start taking orders in December, and then you pick your plants up in March. Our plant sale ordering has closed for this year, but you can look at our website and see the types of plants that we sell, so that you can start planning for next year. So these are the forms that native plants are commonly available in. Containers are available all year, and they can basically be planted anytime the ground isn't frozen. Plugs are available only from certain nurseries, like some of the native plant nurseries. They have they're like container plants in that they are available year round. They have a top growth that is similar in size to about a 4-inch pot, but the root growth is more like a 1-gallon pot. So you're really getting a really good root system for not very much money. They're less expensive and easy to plant. The native perennials that we sell through our plant sale come in plug form. Bare root plants are also really affordable, but only available in early spring. These plants are harvested while they're dormant, and they need to be planted relatively quickly after you receive them. Most of the trees and shrubs through our plant sale are bare root plants. And then live stakes, certain species of plants that root easily, like willow and red twig dogwood, can be planted as live stakes. They establish best in moist conditions. They can be planted late fall through early spring when they're dormant and when the soil is more wet. They are very inexpensive and are available from native plant nurseries, or you can also harvest them yourself. They do have a short shelf life. They need to be covered with burlap and kept damp and planted within about a week of receiving them. So when you are thinking about planting, it's good to identify your goals for your planting and recognize your opportunities. So first, we're going to talk about the goal of decreasing erosion and stabilizing slopes. Plant foliage intercepts precipitation before it hits the ground and causes erosion. So plants of varying heights, trees, shrubs, and ground covers provide more opportunities to intercept precipitation and allow it to evaporate before it reaches the ground where it can cause erosion. Include lots of evergreens in your planting to intercept more precipitation in the winter when most of our rainfall occurs. Roots stabilize the slope. So if you plant a layered canopy, the results will be roots that grow to different depths and stabilize the soil profile more effectively. Roots also remove water from the soil by carrying it upwards through the plant tissue. Any vegetation growing on the surface of the soil slows the velocity of runoff and traps sediment. You have to realize, though, that it takes time for plants to establish and be effective at preventing erosion, which is why you should always try to retain as much established native vegetation on your property as possible. So another goal when selecting plants for a shoreline is likely to be retaining or creating views. So as much as you can, keep healthy trees on your property, and if necessary, have them pruned by a certified arborist to open up a view. There are proper ways to prune trees that will increase your view without compromising the health of the tree. When you're choosing new plants and thinking about views, choose plants that can easily be pruned to maintain views, or choose those that have a more open growth habit to begin with. Shore pine is an excellent example of that. When placing new plants, frame the view corridor with trees and taller shrubs on either side, and leave the view corridor open by planting it with lower growing shrubs, ground covers, or native grasses. Vegetation is an important part of the near-shore ecosystem. It provides food, shelter, and shade. So when you're thinking about plants for your shoreline property, include plants that have blooms, berries, nuts, and seeds, and include plants that will provide shade along the shoreline. Shade is critical for spawning forage fish, as heat and direct sun will dry out and kill eggs. The same vegetation that shades the beach will also provide insects and detritus that drop into the water and become food for juvenile Chinook. So there are lots of native plants with showy features. So when you're choosing new plants, why not include ones that flower, have fall colors and berries and interesting bark? These are just a few of my favorites. I also wanted to talk about how plants can define spaces and guide movement through your site. To simplify it, plants can be thought of as building elements, sort of like floors, walls, and ceilings. Low-growing ground covers or flowering lawns could be considered a floor, and people will be encouraged to walk where they are planted. Dense planting of shrubs could act like walls, blocking or revealing part of a view or restricting access. And tree canopies can be thought of as ceilings, suggesting rooms or places to gather. So with thoughtful placement of plants, you can create spaces and guide traffic through your property. So now I'm going to talk about a technique that you can use to do a design for your property. Whether or not you choose to draw a design may depend on the size of your site, how long you're going to take to implement the project, and how you prefer to approach a project. I recommend doing at least a simple plan so you can try some different layouts. A plan drawing will also help you make choices, create a timeline for your project, calculate the number of plants you need, and organize your efforts. This is a property on Port Gamble, and the person that lives here is interested in doing some shoreline planting. I received the address and some photos, but didn't visit the site. Instead, I've made some assumptions about it for the purpose of this demonstration. So these are the steps you can take. Print a Google map of your property with the satellite view turned on and include the scale. Measure a feature on the site, like the length of the bulkhead, and compare that with the scale dimension on the print that you just made. You'll probably have to adjust the size of your print with the copier enlargement and reduction features to make it match as close as possible to your measured distance. It doesn't have to be exact for these purposes, though. Put some tracing paper over the print and trace the important existing features like buildings, existing vegetation, fences, drain fields, reserve drain fields, underground pipes, utilities, and setbacks. And make notes of other important features like view corridors, slopes, pathways, soil types, and sunny and shady areas. Then consider your goals for your property, make several copies of your site plan, and start to sketch out some options. This is the design that I did for this property. So this is just a demo design, and some of these elements may not work here for one reason or another, because I didn't do a site visit, but I included them to illustrate as many options as I could. So my design goals for this property are to decrease erosion, increase infiltration where appropriate, retain views, direct foot traffic, have seasonal year-round interest, and improve habitat. Beginning at the top of the slope near the house, I've included some features that could reduce runoff from the impervious surfaces of the house and the areas around it. These include a cistern that would collect roof runoff and could provide irrigation for future plantings. And on the south side of the house, where there's an area of concentrated foot traffic, I've indicated pervious pavement. Pervious pavement stands up to traffic while also allowing runoff to infiltrate. And I've also included a rain garden that captures roof runoff in a shallow depression, again, allowing it to infiltrate. The feature down the middle of the property is a low-growing flowering lawn. This provides both a view corridor and access to the beach. I would try to keep it narrow and would recommend one of the eco lawn mixes that are available. A low-growing ground cover or a mix of grasses and other plants would also work. This planting should be evergreen to prevent exposed bare soil in the winter. The existing site, when I looked at Google Earth, had what looked like multiple trails down the slope to the shore. So I'm suggesting with this design, consolidating this into one pathway to reduce the area of the property that is compacted bare ground. The design has a buffer planting on each side of the lawn area that includes evergreen plants like shore pine, Pacific wax myrtle, salal, and evergreen huckleberry, and deciduous shrubs like ocean spray, vine maple, snowberry, Pacific ninebark, and mock orange. As we talked about earlier, including layers of trees, shrubs, and ground covers is the best way to prevent erosion and stabilize the soil. So I would suggest that there also be an evergreen understory of plants like coastal strawberry, fringe cup, and sword fern. Near the shore, I've included salt-tolerant grasses like dune grass and perennials like beach lupin, coastal gumweed, and Douglas aster. I've indicated some hooker willow near the shore area that will provide shade for insects. For the fish and the insects. So a word of caution, if you live on a shoreline bluff, you need to take great care when collecting and redirecting runoff. Saturation of soils can lead to landslides and slope failures, so you should always seek professional advice regarding drainage methods. So let's talk about planting. Before planting, remove existing weeds and competing vegetation as much as you can. This can make all the difference in the success of a new planting project. The best times to plant are fall, when the soil is still warm and winter precipitations will provide irrigation. Early spring is also a good time to plant, and that's when the bare root plants are available. The time you want to avoid planting, if possible, is summer, especially in a hot sunny day. If you do plant in summer, do so in the morning or in the evening when it's cloudy or rainy. When you plant, dig your planting hole 1.5 to 2 times wider than the roots and about as deep as the roots. Roughen the side of the planting hole to encourage the roots to grow beyond it. Untangle the roots or loosen them if they're growing in a circle. Place the plant at the same level as it was in the container and refill the planting hole with native soil. Very gently compact the soil to reduce the air pockets around the roots. Water deeply and let the soil settle. Add more water, add more soil if needed to cover any roots that may have been exposed. Place a thick layer of shredded wood chips around the plant, being careful not to bury the stem of the plant. If you're planting on the slope, stagger the rows of plants. Create a shelf with a low berm around the bottom of the plant to help hold the water in the planting basin. These techniques will slow the flow of water down the slope and allow it to soak in around the roots of the new plant. One of the best things you can do for maintenance is to place shredded wood mulch around your newly planted trees and shrubs. This will help retain moisture and prevent weed growth. I would say 2 inches minimum, but 8 inches is not too much. So basically it's as much as you can get. When you do see weeds, pull them as quickly as possible, especially the pesky ones like blackberry. Water carefully the first 1 to 3 summers after planting. The amount you water should decrease each year. Water only enough to moisten the root zone of the plant. It's okay if they dry out a little bit between waterings. And remember that you don't want to add water to steep slopes or at-risk slopes. If you put in the effort in the first few years, it really pays off down the road. Make sure you plan for maintenance. If you can't keep up with it yourself, I would suggest you find someone who can help you with it. It's a really good investment. And then keep in mind what they say about plants. The first year they sleep, the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. So you have to have some patience. So in summary, observe your own property and similar properties to yours to see what's growing well. Do research from some reliable sources. Identify your goals for planting and consider your opportunities. Make a plan, take photographs, make a plant list, plan for maintenance, and enjoy your plants. If you have any questions about native plants for your property or any other questions about things I covered, please feel free to contact me and have a look at the Kitsap Conservation District programs on our website and on Facebook. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny. I do have a couple questions coming in here through the Q&A. If you don't mind, we'll take a couple minutes to answer some of those.
Sure.
Awesome. All right, so let's see. First one I've got, any suggestions on best methods for removing lawn and replacing with native shrubs, ground cover, or trees? Remove the top 6 inches of lawn and replace with new soil mulch, or try to cover grass to smother and then plant natives with mulch?
So both of those will work. It's just a matter of how much time you want to take. If you're willing to take, a growing season or maybe a year, I think smothering is great because you're not removing all of that organic matter. But if you want to get it done a little faster, then yes, you're going to have to scrape away the lawn and bring in some soil and some organic matter. So either way works.
Awesome, thank you. All right, next question. We've got, does Nootka rose transplant well? We have quite a bit on our property, but would like to try on a bluff where not much grows. Can you add soil to the bluff for transplant? If so, what is best?
Well, I do know that Nootka rose is pretty easy to transplant. I would do it in the winter when the plant's dormant. I can't speak to adding soil to a bluff because I just don't have that experience in my toolbox. But I would say you probably, if you're going to try planting it on a bluff, I would just plant it in the native soil because that's where it's going to have to establish eventually anyway.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, and I've got one more here. It says, all right, in your opinion, which native shrubs are the best options to increase slope stability?
I think ocean spray is really good. So I'd say ocean spray, snowberry, Nootka rose, tall Oregon grape. I think those are my top choices, just off the top of my head. The resource list has some really good sources for some good lists that will help you out too with any that I've forgotten to mention.
Awesome, thank you. All right, and then it looks like I've got one more. It kind of leads off that previous question. So it says, what plants do you recommend to prevent erosion at levels only reached at spring tides?
I would guess maybe the dune grasses and the beech hardy perennials, but maybe Jim would have some other thoughts about that.
I would totally agree. Yeah, in that order, the dune grass is always my first one where it gets salty.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, you guys. It looks like that's all the questions we have for right now. Thank you to Jenny and Jim for your presentations today. They were wonderful. I learned a lot, so I hope everyone else did too. All right. So as we wrap up here, I also wanted to thank all of our participants today. Thanks for sticking with us. A lot of you were here last week too, so I appreciate you guys being part of both these webinars. I hope you learned a lot and enjoyed your time with us. Last week, I did mention I was going to send out an email with a survey and some resources. We decided that it would be in everyone's best interest to send one email collectively. So you will be seeing that email in the next day or so. We wanted to wait after both the webinars were done so we could get all the resources in one place and make sure everyone had all the right information. So be on the lookout for that in the next few days. We will also send out a Facebook update in our Facebook group, the Shore Friendly Facebook group, once the webinar recordings are posted, since both of these have been recorded. So if you guys want to review any information or just take a look again, you'll be welcome to do that. And I'll make sure to keep that updated within our Facebook group. From here, I'm going to hand it over to Christina before we all sign off. Thanks again, you guys.
Hi, everybody. Can you see me? Okay, I'll just assume yes. Yeah, thank you so much to the presenters, for Jim and Jenny for doing some great presentations today. I learned some new things. It was great. Definitely, Jenny, I love the tips for the site plan and going through the exercise of creating one. And Jim also, you know, even though we're promoting shoreline restoration here, I definitely appreciate the message that you know, that all sites are unique. We don't always need a project, and we need to be really cognizant that beaches are dynamic, and we need to approach restoration, yeah, very, very diligently. So thanks for you know, stressing that. You know, we do have a couple of minutes here left, so I did want to open it up for questions about the program if anybody had any. So you know, maybe I'll just kind of hang out here for a little bit if there are any questions. And if not, you know, thank you very much. And we were thrilled to see also all the inquiry calls and emails over the last week. So please keep them coming, and we will connect you with information that you need. And if you have any questions about Shore Friendly Kitsap, please don't hesitate to call or email. Thank you. But if you do want to ask some questions, please go ahead with the Q&A, and I'll hang out here for a bit until 3. Okay, so here's a question. What is the process to have our property looked at by Shore Friendly Kitsap? So we take in inquiries and calls kind of on an as needed and first come, first serve basis. Our process generally is, you know, we talk on the phone, and then we'll do a general site visit. That's sort of the first step. And then from there, you know, we look at, we go into a more specific feasibility, as if there's an actual shore friendly type project, which would be some sort of bulkhead or armor removal or replacement with soft shore. So that's kind of the general criteria. Okay, then I have another. So yeah, so folks here asking, you know, Chuck Holland, hi, and I will definitely give you a call about your Port Gamble Bay Beach. And okay, I'm getting quite a few questions here about our website and phone number. Angie, if you could type that into the chat for me, that would be great. The Shore Friendly phone number I'll just read it off here, is 360-307-4242. And the Shore Friendly website is shorefriendlykitsap.com, and our email, Angie will get that in there as well.
Yes, absolutely, doing that now. Thank you.
And there was also a question here about how many participants. I think the question is asking how many did we have today? And there was, I think the highest point of folks logged on was 53 people. Yeah, but we did have full registration at 100. So we were, yeah, we were full in terms of those who registered. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed it. This was our first time doing the Zoom thing and running the webinar. So yeah, thanks for bearing with us, and thanks Angie for facilitating. You did an awesome job, and we couldn't have done it without you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Well, it looks like this might be it. If there's any last minute questions, give you another minute to enter them. And if not, we'll be signing off here soon.
All right, Christina, what do you think? Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. I just want to make sure that I write down the folks in the chat here that I need to follow up
perfect.
with.
Okay, awesome.
So
I'll let you do that.
I did see one question about invasive ivy. I don't know if maybe Jenny can reach out afterwards.
I answered that one via text.
Yeah, Jesse got to that.
Oh, okay. Okay, awesome.
If she's still listening and would like to reach out to us for a more detailed answer, I'd be happy to field that question. She can find my email on our website, or I'll just type it in chat too.
I can't actually find that one now.